We're here to have real conversations with the real people you want to hear from about real topics that you really want to learn. And we're here to help you open up with real thinking. We're here to open up your awareness and help you become the real you. Welcome to the Wake the Bleep Up Show. Welcome, everybody, to the Wake the Bleep Up Show, where we have real conversations with real people about real topics that you want to know about, with the idea of helping you get into some real thinking. And today we're joined with our great friend, Lane Kawaoka. Did I say that right?
Yep, you got it, Tony.
Awesome. So Lane is a best-selling author. He's an ex-engineer, W-2 employee that moved to financial freedom in real estate. And we're here to hear about that story and to help you guys grow and learn how to build some wealth and how to improve your lives. So welcome, Lane. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Aloha, everybody.
Aloha. Yes, he is in Hawaii. So if you guys, he's early morning versus my afternoon here. So it's a little different time zone. So Lane, tell me a little bit about your story. I mean, you were an engineer. How did you go from engineer to real estate investor?
Yeah, so I call my story kind of the linear path. Maybe it is somewhat atypical. We weren't broke growing up. I guess we were part of this middle class that obviously the middle class is shrinking these days. They're kind of like endangered species. But, my parents, they went to college. They, had good, white collar jobs. Nothing crazy though. I mean, it's not like they were, in today's numbers, it's not like they were making $300,000, $400,000 plus per year, like a lot of my clients are today.
Right.
They just taught me to, be frugal with my money and go to school and, do what they did, right? Go to school, study hard and, get a good job and, raise 2.1 kids, buy a house to live in, all this stuff that we're all taught to do, right? And that whole 401k thing in there that got created in the 1980s.
Right.
So you could say I was somewhat brainwashed to do this. Growing up, I was always one of these kids who was a little bit lazy. So like in high school, Google was a super new thing, right? And I tend to be kind of, pretty up on the tech stuff myself. And I Googled like, well, what is it that I can do with the least amount of college education to get the most amount of pay? Forget being a doctor. That takes too much effort, right? Well, it's an engineer, right? I mean, it's like 5 or 6 different engineering. So that's what I did. Maybe I was good at math and science and, so that's what I became. And I guess maybe it resonates with a lot of people out there. Like you kind of sleepwalk through life, right? You're on this track, or I call it the linear path. And I didn't wake up until, that first day going to the job, started to work for a construction company and with my industrial engineering degree. And I was like, this sucks. But, I had a good salary, so I saved up to buy a house to live in. And because I was traveling all over for work, I was only home on Saturdays. And I just decided, well, why don't I just rent out this place and make some great, beer money, and I can just live on the road for a few years. This is my early 20s, right?
Right.
So that's what I did. But then this is kind of where I realized, wow, the power of passive cash flow, the tenant paid down my mortgage for me, the tax benefits. And this is when I was like, wait a minute, if I just do this a few more times, I'll be able to just, quit the rat race, fire my boss. So that was kind of when it all started.
Nice. No, that's great. And so do you primarily focus on rentals, or do you do flips? Do you do a little bit of everything, or where's your focus primarily?
Yeah, so I mean, I never did any of that flipping stuff or wholesaling stuff, right? Like I always had, a good salary where I was saving at least 30 grand, 40 grand per year. So I was able to plow that money right into down payments. And, we have a lot of free e-courses on my website where people can learn how to buy rental properties, turnkey rentals, remote rentals. That's not the main curriculum these days because, that was how I was in the beginning. I was buying these little rental properties remotely. First a handful in Seattle, then when Seattle got too expensive in 2012, I started to buy properties in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, a lot cheaper places, right?
Yeah,
Red
yeah, yeah.
states, you know, basically like $100,000 properties that rented for $900.
Right.
And it hit this ratio of 1% rent to value ratio, where you take the monthly rental price and divide it by the purchase price, and you're looking for something about 1%.
Hmm.
Um, and again, people can, the numbers aren't that difficult. I think sometimes people get a little intimidated by the numbers. They say, "Oh, well, you guys are engineers, you guys are smart with numbers." Like, guys, it's not that hard, right?
It's not.
Don't, like, a lot of things, like, I'm sure you talk to your clients about, like, don't take yourself out of the game, man. Like, it's not that hard, right? You guys can do this.
Hmm.
And then, like I said, like, if you guys want to go and download my free analyzer, like, it's a spreadsheet. It just
Yeah.
does all the work for you, right? But that was what I did initially from, 2015. I had 11 of these rental properties, and I realized it just wasn't scalable. And I started to meet other accredited investors. So accredited investors are guys $1 million net worth and greater, and they have a income of $200,000 more per year.
Hmm.
So what I realized, what they were doing, a lot of them had owned rental properties, did exactly what I was doing, but they were trading those in for private placements and syndications as a passive investor, and kind of scaling up that way.
Right.
And that was kind of where I was a pivot point for me in 2015, getting involved in those types of deals. And that's kind of what the new book is out, The Wealth Elevator. And the whole construct of the book is there's different floors to the wealth elevator. I started on the first floor of the wealth elevator, where I had a good job. I was buying rental properties and then just plugging away. The second floor was kind of that transition where you start to become a credit investor, and you're starting to invest in different things. But most of the books out there, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, Dave Ramsey, they're all books written for guys in the basement, right? Or
Hmm.
there's a lot of other content out there for guys who are getting out of debt.
Right.
And I think that's great. Like, I like Dave Ramsey. I like his whole vibe. I kind of met him a couple months ago, and but the content, it's like you need to figure out where you are. So like in my book, I have like this pull out section where you see where your net worth is, your income is, and that's what floor you're on.
Right.
And these are the set of strategies that you need to be doing, right? And
Oh,
it
nice.
may or may not be what you thought before, may not be what the YouTube channel you're watching is saying
Right.
to do, right?
Right. No, that's great. I love that you break it down like that so people can see where they're at. Because a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't when I first started investing in real estate, that you don't have to have a lot of money to get started, and you can get started regardless of where you're at. When I first started, So it's funny you mentioned Seattle and getting too expensive. So my wife and I, my family and I, we lived in Seattle for first 40 years of our lives,
Yeah, I
and
see the Seahawks back
yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So, and so we live in Florida now. We moved to Florida in 2018, and you're right, it was just outrageous what the prices had gotten to. And so we got to Panama City, Florida, 2 months before Hurricane Michael rolled through. So that was great timing on that. Although it opened up an opportunity, because it was about that time I also got into real estate investing. I met a couple of really good investors down in Florida, and we did do a lot of flipping, even though we did have some rentals. We did a lot of flipping just because of a post storm. We were driving around finding houses that still had the blue tarps on, and talking to the owners and making a win-win-win deal for everybody, and generated some great income. But what I was getting at is, it's just, I didn't have much in the way of savings to get going. You really don't have to. There's ways of making deals with people that you don't necessarily have to have a lot of cash flow or income to do so. Now, is that something you teach, or is that completely different? Am I off topic here?
Yeah, I mean, so like I would say, like, in my book, that we call that the basement level, right? Like,
Yeah.
guys who don't have a job yet, you need a job, right?
Mhm.
And in the world of real estate, the stuff you're talking about, that's a job, right? And
Mhm.
it can be a very, very lucrative job. But what we try to do with folks, you know, we ask them, like, what is your highest and best use, right? So obviously, if you're a dentist or a doctor making 400, 500, $600,000 per year or greater, you may not like it, but you need to do that.
Yeah.
because your highest hourly rate is going to be there. Some of our clients are, guys who make, like when I first started, right? Just low six-figure salary or barely six-figure salary. And I was able to save. If you're able to save at least $10,000 to $20,000 a year, you can get moving on the first floor of the wealth elevator systems, right? Which is buying little rental properties and moving along and continuing to work in that day job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be, I'm sure you work with your guys on this, where, there may be some cognitive dissonance on things you like and what you're passionate. I'm a little bit more of a hard ass. I'm like, look, whatever your highest and best usage, you may not like it, but suck it up and do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And buy some rental properties. And then when your net worth gets to be about $2 to $3 million, now we can start to think about what is kumbaya for you and like what gives you happiness and fulfillment.
Right.
But I grew up in this way, and this is kind of my philosophy. And I think I reflect a lot of some people out there, where put your own oxygen mask on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if like, you make under $80,000 a year, right? You don't have a professional career, and you may have to do like flipping houses or wholesaling houses. I don't know anything about that stuff. I never did it. I don't claim to do it. I don't trying to fake it till I make it with that stuff.
Right.
But that's a job, right? And like, you're right. There are a lot of ways to get into real estate with little to no money.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of effort. It's highly, highly competitive, because guess what? Everybody has no money out there to do it too. But I think, people who are getting started needing to get traction, you need to get income first, right? Real estate, like anything else, is a highly capital intensive business. You need money to get started. And which is why I like it so much, because there's a barrier to entry. Not anybody can go out and buy a 400 unit apartment complex or build a 200 unit development.
Right.
That's why we love it. That's why a lot of high net worth people love it,
Mm-hmm.
because it keeps the competition barrier to entry up high. But I think, I mean, like, we can kind of go many directions with this, I suppose. But like, I would say, like, look at what you have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not a huge fan of college, right? I went to a lot of college. I got a master's degree. I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world, right? I do think it's the best path for most people out there, because
Mm-hmm.
most people should not be entrepreneurs for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that, but like, that may not be the path for everybody. And if you're not there, and you're already in your 20s, 30s, especially 40s or later, and you haven't paid that big dollar figure and wasted time to go to college yet, it's probably not going to be in the cards for you.
Right.
So there's these other set of things that you could try to do. Real estate entrepreneurship could be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not the guy to learn about that type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're the guy who's somebody who's already at X level. You help them go to the next level.
That's correct. I take people from 35 miles an hour and I take them up to 100.
Nice. And so how did you go from that? I mean, you mentioned how you got started and how you started buying stuff. So how did you really make that transition from where you got started? You said you started getting these $1 million net worth people and bigger investors. How did you really make that breakthrough to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, it happened around 2016. I just started to start a podcast, right? And at that time, I was just talking about my struggles and trials and tribulations, and telling my story of just buying these little rental properties, right? And it was very tactical, telling people how to do it, and it was starting to build a community around it, because I'll be honest, like, it's lonely. It's lonely to be a person who has $500,000 net worth and greater, and in my like 30s, right? Like, it's a strange dichotomy too. I mean, people who are in our community, most of them are first generation multimillionaires, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, our parents weren't loaded.
Right.
We weren't taught this type of stuff. A lot of immigrants too,
Mm-hmm.
first gen. And like, most people who have money, they blow it, right? They're at the country club. They're not looking at investing in blue collar assets like Class B apartments or mobile home parks or things like that. So it's a strange dichotomy of, yeah, you're wealthy, right? But you're not, you're still growing your net worth, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, we talk about like great, you know, example here. Most people like trust attorneys when they're putting up these fancy irrevocable trusts that cost 20, 30 grand to set up that make you, just blow LLCs out of the water, right? Obviously, they're a lot more expensive in terms
Right.
of asset protection. They'll set up these trusts where the generation one, like, I guess that would be my parents are extremely wealthy, right? But that's not the case in my situation or my client's situation,
Right.
right? Like our
Right.
parents are, kind of broke, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's an ideal situation where I give, like generation two, give my parents the money and have them assign it to a trust for me so that I'm not the trustee, they are, and I'm the beneficiary of said trust, right? Like, so
Right.
those are like the unique things that come out of, we are we are the first multi-millionaire generation, right? I think most people, it's pretty easy to get to $1 million, right? Especially when you get older, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you buy a house. In Hawaii, you buy a house, you're a millionaire, right? Because
Yeah.
all the
Right.
houses are $1 million there, right? Like, doesn't take it just takes a little bit of like saving, right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, I don't want to be tone deaf here, right? Some people are like, "Oh my goodness, that's a horrible thing to say," but I think what I speak for is like there's a lot of hardworking people that are like just like me, like engineers, dentists, doctors, that I kind of fight for them because we're the ones that went to all this school. We're the ones who pay all the taxes, right? We're the ones that are getting killed with taxes. Half of every dollar goes to taxes for a lot of like high income earners like us. And we're the ones also, I think benefiting society the most, right? Or like helping society the most, that there was never really an advocate for these hardworking people.
Yeah.
And they just get sacked
Yep.
with taxes and, and so that was, what are the strategies for those types of people, right? I think eventually everybody gets to the first, second floor of the wealth elevator, right? And
Mhm.
needs these types of strategies. And that was kind of where there was no infrastructure, what I felt was built. And that was kind of where the podcast started to develop into. Started in 2016, started to get traction. And then, yeah, just started to build this community. And I think, you probably say the same thing. Like, you meet so many cool people. And it was like,
Yeah.
especially like I'm an introvert for sure, but I love talking about this stuff. But what I really like is like uniting with people with the similar values, right? Like saving our money, working hard, going to this thing that we don't quite necessarily believe in, like college, but hey, we suck it up and do it,
Yeah.
right? We're good worker ants
Yeah.
and we do it.
Yeah. And it's I like that we just said there, you just suck it up and do it, because a lot of people are afraid to just suck it up and do it. A lot of people are, like you said, content being that W-2 worker and just not whether they have that ability, whether they're even an upper management level making that 200 or more a year, they're afraid to take that next step, put in the extra effort to do something like real estate investing or any kind of entrepreneurship. And I also agree, you're 100% that the folks making these multi-millions of dollars are the ones getting killed by the taxes and really helping society, and they don't get enough credit for it. And they don't. I mean, it's frowned upon in most places, and it's really too bad. It's too bad. I
Yeah.
mean, all the
Yeah.
all the people I know, it's one of the things that's hard to swallow.
Yeah. I mean, you're a coach, so you kind of see this too, where like I have a big range of clients myself, right?
Mhm.
Like the doctors or entrepreneurs, some of them make like phenomenal salaries.
Right.
Like I didn't know you could get paid $1 million a year as a doctor, right? Like I
Right.
didn't know. Like and for some of those guys, like the big thing is like this need component, right? Like those guys don't need to do any of this stuff.
Right.
They're fine paying like
Mhm.
50% of their money to taxes, and they still got a great life.
Yeah.
They still got like a Ferrari. But like you take an engineer, right? Engineers, like we we barely get paid $150,000 a year, and that's more as more of a senior position.
Yeah.
And you're never gonna get a Mercedes. Well, I guess they make Mercedes for cheaper these days, but you're never gonna get like
Right.
high quality of life,
Right.
right? Good quality of life, right? Great quality of life, right? By all stretches of the imagination, right? But the engineer is going to have a lot more need and motivation to want to do this stuff that's outside the box, off the
Mhm.
beaten path. some people say, well, engineers are good at numbers. That's why they do that's why you see engineers all the time in real estate.
Right.
Like, no, they're just broke. They need it more
Right.
than the doctors and dentists, right? Or the higher income earners,
Right.
right? So I think a lot of it, to your earlier point, it is like need based. Like, how much do you like? Engineers also aren't dummies. They're like, all right, if I project out my net worth over the years, you know, what we tell our folks is like, you want to get to a point where you have $3-4 million net worth, and that's at that point you can start to go into cruise control. $1 million, $2 million ain't enough. That ain't enough, right? Inflation and everything, that ain't enough. But how do you accelerate up to that number, $3, $4, $5 million net worth? You're going to need to do things outside the box, which means investing in alternative investments, which are syndications and private placements, doing these alternative tax strategies where we see most of our folks shaving off 10-20% of their taxes that first year.
Yeah.
And that's without real estate professional status. If you throw into the mix real estate professional status, which is just a designation, a checkbox on your taxes, then could possibly cut it in half or even way more than that, right? And then do a little bit of infinite banking or credit investor banking. And that's the trifecta. That's the secret sauce that we educate people on.
Nice. No, and that's great. And like you said, most people don't understand that. I mean, it's just tax strategies alone. Most people are just letting some CPA do their taxes and not knowing themselves. And the CPAs a lot of times are just going through the motions, just like to get it off the table. Okay, well, you're my next client. I'm just going to get yours done and then move on to the next one. And so they're not, in most cases, not all cases, of course, but in most cases, they really don't care about saving you the most money, regardless of what they tell you, or
Right.
maybe they're not aware of some of these extra strategies that can help you save the most money. And so it's doing your own research or learning some of these strategies yourself. So even if you still use a professional accountant, at least you can say, hey, have you looked at this? Have you looked at this? Have you checked out this? What about my area over here with my real estate investments? What about this deduction? There's a lot out there that people don't realize.
Yeah, I'll give a golden rule to people. You can turn this into a YouTube short, but never take financial advice from somebody who's not financially free themselves.
Right.
Most of these CPA guys are just bean counters, and their role is to put your numbers into the form. It's not tax strategy. I mean, if you guys want a referral to the folks I use, feel free to reach out. But like a lot of it is you educating yourself about the basics to guide them, right? Think of them as kind of your contractor in a way, right? You tell them what to architect. And this is kind of, like you said, like these CPAs, like they're still working the job. And a lot of these strategies are very simple. And I found this in 2016. That was when my eyes were open. Again, I was investing in real estate for 7 years up to this point. But the key is getting around other accredited investors doing this stuff. And, you are the 5 people that you hang out with most. This is where my eyes were open. I was like, wow, I didn't, what are you doing with your taxes? Why are you doing that? Because so kind of a lot of these things are counterintuitive. Why are you getting life insurance? I thought that stuff was a scam. I thought whole life insurance was a scam. Oh, you're configuring it a different way? Wait, tell me more, right? Like, like what, you've been doing this for like 2 decades, right? Like, wow. And your net worth is 6 mil. Oh, I'm going to listen to you. Right. Numbers don't lie. So this is, for me, it was like, I mean, this is almost like 10 years ago. Like all these strategies that I started to absorb. I mean, first it's like drinking from the fire hose, just because it's so different than what our parents taught us. And what's put out there in normal, like financial freedom, fire movement nonsense. It's the opposite. But as I started to tease it together and I got the social, I use social proof, right? Like I'm going to see what the high net worth people I hang out with do. I started to distill it down into these 3 silos: alternative investments, infinite banking, and the tax strategies. And I was like, wait a minute, this is stuff that anybody could do. It's just is kind of opposite than what we're taught. And I was like, well, why doesn't everybody do this, right? Why doesn't every like hardworking, person, implement these types of strategies, right? It's like, well, then you think about it, if everybody bought a handful of rental properties, paid a lot less in taxes, and then, got to $3 million net worth in their 40s, they probably say F it and not do anything. So then I was like, yeah, probably society would not, especially our folks, right? Like they're all the doctors and dentists and engineers. Like who would design the bridges? Who would,
Hmm.
pick the contractor? Who would pick the consultant, construction manager? Who would drill the teeth? Who would, diagnose the cancers, right? Like, that wouldn't be a good way to run society, right? So
Right,
you
right, right.
understand why after a while.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Well, and it's like you said earlier, and like I was saying, that not everyone's meant to be entrepreneurs. And we do need I don't use this phrase very often, but we do need like the worker bees. We do need the people that are out there doing that work. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with living that. It's just maybe not what everyone wants, not what you want, not what I want. you know
Yeah.
However, there are some people that are good going and working construction every day and coming home and raising the 2.1 kids that you were talking about. And again, like you were talking about, why doesn't everyone do this? Because it's not the way we were taught. Our parents, I love them to death, but they were same as yours. There was, white collar workers didn't have a ton of money, but we weren't really broke. But at the same time, they're teaching those strategies of go to school, get good grades, get a good job, work for 45, 50 years, and then retire and live off your 401k or whatever your retirement is now, 401k. And it's a shame. So my latest book that came out, the very first chapter in my book is called Forget the Programming. And it's about that. It's about looking at things differently than what we were taught growing up, because only if you want something more. If you don't want to change, you want to keep doing the same thing, cool, then don't worry about it. But if you want more, then you have to start thinking differently. You have to start thinking differently than that person that just went to college and is working as a high level engineer in the job. You have to open up that thought process to what else is out there. What other strategies can I use? Whether I do them on the side or I go full time with it, whatever that is for you, it's not going to be the same as you were taught growing up to go to school, get good grades, go get a job and work for 40 years. It's different.
Yeah. If you want, we always, I do free intro calls for people out there. And what I noticed, about 1/3 of the people step forward and start to adopt the strategies. 2/3 kind of reject it. And I guess that's a good batting average, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
good for MLB, but it's not for everybody, I guess. But if everybody did it, what would society look like? Like I said, but just using my story, like again, I started investing in 2009, and this stuff is not the get rich quick scheme by any
Mhm.
means. Like it
Right.
takes a long time to build up your assets. I had 11 rentals in 2015, so 6 years later, and I wasn't financially free at that point. No
Mhm.
way, Jose.
Right.
But I will tell you, like, still working a day job at that point, but I had kind of switched to better employers, got around better coworkers, started to actually enjoy my life and career.
Mhm.
And I probably would have I probably would still be there today, right? Plugging away instead of like running around in a frantic state of saving my money and financial freedom, this, financial freedom, that. In 2016, 17, and 18, I was probably in a different headspace where it's like, I don't have to be here. I'm here because I like the job,
Yeah.
or I really like the coworkers, the people I work with. A lot more different, like, energy
Yeah.
level. And that's kind of what I hope for most of my folks is like, you get your money in order, and then you're gonna have to work, right? Like you have to be a producer of society. You can't just sit around and do nothing.
Right.
But you plug yourself into society, a place where a good energy for you, and you can continue to be a good supplier of value to
Mhm.
society.
Right. Right. So let's shift a little bit here. I want to ask you, what are you outside of real estate? What are some of your hobbies? What do you like to do when you're not worried about real estate?
Dude, I mean, we're in the growth years, so as an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurs out there know that I don't got hobbies, man. Like I got a kid, so that's takes up all the hobbies. I mean, most people without any any business, they kids takes up everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, the other thing I do is like I do CrossFit, so I
Oh,
mean, it's
nice.
short, it's quick. I mean, that's what keeps me like, good energy and good in
Yeah.
health to kind of do what I need to do. But I'll be honest, like I don't really have any hobbies,
Yeah.
other than, the bare essentials there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of lame, right? I mean,
Yeah, it depends. Each
maybe
their own.
that said, like, I do resonate with, if you find something you're passionate about, like I enjoy coming on here, talking to good folks like yourself, kind of spreading the good word and, continue, I like to write and, do YouTube videos and podcasts, right? And dive more into these types of topics. That is like, it's not really work to me, right? Certain things are, right? But, I've over the years, built the team and, kind of outsource those things and trying to do more of the things I do and do enjoy doing. And it kind of, those things become less friction. And, that's kind of how I've designed my life. I mean, I don't really feel the need to go on vacation or,
Mhm.
like when I'm sitting here in my chair at my desk, pounding away with stuff, like that's what I like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of kooky, right? But
No, no, no.
whatever's.
You actually just said it. Your podcasting, your videos, that's I call that a hobby. I mean, I do the same thing. For me, the only other thing is fishing. I'm an avid fisherman, and because of being where I'm at in Florida, I can do it very short, like you said, for short periods of time. I can go out for an hour, catch a few fish, come back and continue on with business as usual. So it doesn't take up a ton of time, but it's one of my passions that everyone knows outside of my family and my business is fishing. So, but no, how old's your kid?
3.
3.
So
Wow. So yeah,
I
you are
gotta
in the
be
thick of
around
it.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, you are in the thick of it.
Yeah. I guess I have a pool table and I kind of like pool. I'm not very good. I try not to practice too much because it's kind of messed up when my friends come over and I kick their ass because they practice all the time. I don't want to be that guy, but I got that. But the kids' toys are always on it, so I don't want to clean it up. But I don't. I probably should play that more. I don't. That's just. I call this the lost years. Most of my clients, they're not in their mid 30s or early 40s, right? The time where the kids are ages 1 to 12.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the lost years. And, maybe I don't know how old are your kids or
Yeah. Mine are older, so we're beyond that stage. So we
yeah,
have
but you remember this, right?
oh,
Like those
I
are the years where
remember.
it's like, my
No,
goodness, how
no,
did I get anything done? Right?
exactly. No, you're 100%. 100%. When our kids were younger, there was no time for anything. It was either you're spending time with the kids or you're running them around to different events, sport, little league, whatever it was. There was always something going on. I agree. I did not, I couldn't even have imagined having a successful business when the kids were young. And not that I didn't try. I had various entrepreneurial journeys I tried while the kids were growing up, and I just found that I wasn't able to put the time towards it. And
Yeah.
and that's probably because I started after having kids versus the other way around. But
Yeah, but that's typically how it always works, right? Whether it's a entrepreneur like yourself or like even a passive investor like our guys, like doing something different, taking a little risk. Like you don't do that when you have kids, like because you don't have the time to educate yourself and get around the right people, and
right,
you just don't want to take risks.
right.
Like that's kind of irresponsible if you think about it.
It,
So
it it is. And what are you teaching your kids? I look back now. So our son, our youngest is 17. He's the only one still in the house. But our girls, they never got to see that side. They never got to see dad as the entrepreneur and doing that stuff. They saw me as the worker. I worked in quality assurance. I was a quality assurance manager and director for most of my career, and I made good money. I made what people would consider good money. I was in the 150 plus, every year. And most people consider that really good. So even the times that I took the risks, when it didn't work out, I was probably that guy that gave up just before it was about ready to take off. I'm probably the poster child of that guy early on. But because I made enough money, I wasn't that worried. I'm like, it's okay. I make good money here, so it's okay. Whereas when we moved to Florida is when I really got the eye opening and I really got the itch. And I'm like, nope, that's it. And part of that was when we moved to Florida, we moved because of a job. I took on a new job. They moved us across country, and it turned out it was the worst place I have ever worked. The worst people, the worst environment. I was just terrible. And I would, for being comfortable and pretty happy, to being just flat out miserable. And that's when I made the choice. I'm like, something has to change. And it started with real estate. Then I got into the coaching. I did some other things on the side, and it's amazing now. Now knowing, know if I'd known then what I know now, the famous last words, it would have been a whole different animal. I would have been doing this since like you in your 20s, in my 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just to start things and get established and start things in the right way. Because
Mm-hmm.
you always hear about like the success stories. You never hear about the other four guys exactly like you that totally mishit and failed. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is like, I mean, we see it with our folks. It's like most of the clients are in their late 40s. Another thing is, money compounds, right? Even if you're doing it the wrong way with the 401ks and Roth IRAs, that type of stuff, you tend to, grow your net worth past $1.5 million. And that's you're kind of like, well, maybe I should do something a little bit better with it now that I have a little breathing room.
Right.
So, but that's a hard thing, right? Like to start anything later, especially in your 50s, it's like, dude, it's like you don't have much time,
Right.
especially if things don't go right way, right? Like, I mean, commercial real estate here, oh boy, it's a doozy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, everybody's talking about recession this, recession that, but commercial real estate and financial sector went through their troughs already, and we're coming out of it. Things are on a discount for like 20-30% what it was a couple of years ago.
Right. Right.
So residential real estate, completely different dynamic. But if people are looking to get into commercial real estate these days, this is the freaking time to do it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but unless you are, got the capital around and aware of it, you don't realize that right now, today, 2024 is no different than residential real estate was in 2010 to 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, and you're right. And so a friend of mine, well, I say good acquaintance, not really, I wouldn't call him a good friend, but his name's Paul Flager, and he was the founder and former CEO of a company called Security Properties out of Seattle. And he specialized in commercial real estate his entire life. I got to know him real well back to being a fisherman. He owns a fishing resort up in Vancouver, Canada. And I used to go up there every year and got to know him through one of my other millionaire friends, and we just kind of hung out. And I would just love sitting there hearing his strategies around commercial real estate. And he did his, and I admit I haven't read your book yet, although he did his mostly through investments. So he would go out and find the commercial property or even get ready to build one, and then he would go out and find the investors. He would barely put any money out of pocket. He would, but it was like, okay, he'd gather like even up to 500 and say, here's the return you're going to get here's the minimum return you're going to get on your investment, and then go through with the project, make a bunch, and then do it again and continue to do that. That was his initial strategy. I'm not sure where the organization went from then. He likes to tell stories about the past, but amazing to hear some of that stuff from a guy who's done it. I mean, this guy is, hundreds of millions of dollars of net worth, and to hear him in his now retirement sit there and tell about the good old days of when he started in commercial real estate. But anyway, back to your point, talking to him recently, he said the same thing. He said commercial real estate right now is a great place to be versus the residential, just like you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So you don't want to kick your friends' butts at pool, so you don't practice pool.
Yeah, it's like when you're kids, right? Like, most of us aren't, back then you're not socially aware of things, and you're like practice like the video game, and then you just want to beat your friends. But in reality, for your other three friends, it's super lame when you're like way better than them. So, I learned a thing or two in my 20s and 30s not to be that guy.
I had some roommates like that were growing up, or in my late teens, early 20s, that were the ones that practiced the video game all day, and I didn't want to play with them because they was always kicking
Yeah,
my butt.
exactly, right.
So the one thing I did want to ask you about, and you mentioned it a couple of times. So what are some of the things about the 401ks and Roth IRAs that you bring it up, you're like, people doing it the wrong way. Share with everybody why that's wrong.
Yeah, so four big reasons not a huge fan of IRAs and Roth IRAs. Now, I mean, I caveat all this, like if you're investing in the normal, like sad American investment diet, which is the stuff that the 401k companies want you to invest in, which is their products where they get high fees and they pretty much get to put whatever expense above the line before you take your returns. This doesn't really apply, right? Like if you're investing in Vanguard 500 index type of stuff, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, right?
Right.
Not very good, right? That's, that's why we tell people to get into alternative investments, right? Outside of like your cafeteria of options.
Right.
But if you're investing in alternative investments, real estate, why do people invest in real estate other than the good returns and the hard asset, but the great tax benefits?
Mm-hmm.
You're able to deduct the property and take a paper loss and take this paper loss and possibly deduct it off of your ordinary income or passive income. And that's how you drive your adjusted income down and save a lot in taxes.
Yeah.
And when you invest, you could make a self-directed IRA or a solo 401k and direct those assets into alternatives such as real estate.
Hmm.
But when that entity is not technically not you, and those tax benefits that you're getting from the real estate can't flow to you personally.
Mm. Mm.
So that's a big thing. That's a big number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I mean, everybody knows like taxes are going up, right? So if let's think about this for 1 second. Like the 401k, you put your money into that program and you defer your taxes and you pay your taxes later. But let's actually think about that. I want to pay my taxes now while the taxes are lower for me than
Mm-hmm.
in the future, and give the government a freaking blank check to charge me whatever I want when
Right.
I withdraw it, right? Again, don't just take all this like mumbo jumbo dogma out there that's propagated by all these Wall Street companies, and let's think about this
Mm-hmm.
objectively for a second. Number three, overall taxes are going to be going up in the future, right? How else are you going to pay for all these government entitlement programs, right? I'm pretty agnostic in terms of political group, but both of them are just expanding the budget and going to need to raise more on revenue.
Yep.
And then the old thing about like when you put your money in these retirement accounts, you can't touch it until like age 60, probably going to go up a little bit more, right, over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Most people doing our set of strategies are getting to financial freedom in a third amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. So if you thought your hot stuff getting there when you're 60 or 55, well, you can get there a lot quicker than that. And then you'd want to get at this money a lot earlier, right? Most people in our world, and this is where it's like you to get around other people doing this type of stuff. You are the 5 people you hang out with most.
Yeah. Yep.
Most of the when we're having cocktails, it's like, yeah, I'm thinking about leaving my job when I'm 43, like where do you hear about this type of stuff, right? Like most times it'd be like kind of shame to talk about this type of stuff, right, around normal people, but not in our community, right? Like it's kind of normal, right? It's not like a showboating thing. And with that, like why would you want to be forced to leave your money in these retirement plans till you're 60, 70 years old? Makes no sense. So for 4 reasons right there,
Yeah.
take it or leave it. But that's why I say like think for yourself, right? The numbers don't lie.
No,
People
and
do.
and you hit it on the head with the taxes, because I mean it doesn't matter where you stand financially, you're getting taxed to the hilt on everything. And again, as you get higher in net value or net worth, you are paying more, of course. But even just think about how you own a house, you're getting taxed on your property, you're getting taxed on everything is taxed, even what you buy in the store. You get, let's say you're a W-2 employee, you get your paycheck, you're taxed on that. Then you go and spend that money, or you're getting taxed on that. I mean, just literally the taxes add up. And like you said, why would you want to give the blank check to the government for a tax that's going to increase? There's no way about it. It's going to increase moving forward, and they're going to be able to charge you whatever you want, whatever they want on that money that you've been working your whole life to put away, thinking that you're doing it the way you were taught anyway, and thinking you're getting that return. So no, I
Yeah.
like
So
I like
so
how you
the
put that.
the idea is in this country, you're taxed based on what your adjusted gross income is.
Mm-hmm.
So your
Mm-hmm.
adjusted gross income is basically your income,
Mm-hmm.
which if you make a lot, yeah, you have to pay a lot of taxes. But the idea is to create so much deductions in there, which I don't know, you get it from real estate.
Yeah, yeah, right.
You drive your AGI down legally, and you thus drive your taxable burden down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and even because I I still help some of my W-2 friends with theirs from time to time, because even as a W-2 employee, there are way more deductions out there that people realize that they're not taking advantage of. But as a business owner, especially one that's in real estate, there's way more than people typically realize. And so the tax strategies can definitely help. The one that I love, that's a super minor one that that I always talk to people who are entrepreneurs about, is employ your kids. Employ your kids. You can literally pay your kids. You have to actually pay them in some way, shape, or form. But a friend of mine who taught me this strategy, he's also a real estate investor. He's the one who taught me the strategy. So he pays his kids, I think it's like the maximum, I think, is $12,000 a year for a minor that you
Yeah,
can.
the standard deduction is that number, right? So
Yeah.
if people Google the standard deduction, you could probably the strategy is essentially called income shifting. So you're shifting you're typically making more money, so you're typically in a higher tax bracket.
Right.
Your kids are lower, so you want to income shift, and kind of, to use your fisherman type of analogy, you want to bail off that money to their boat,
Yeah.
to some extent.
Right.
Just one of many like little tax tips here. I kind of tend to stay on like the big rocks, which is like invest in real estate where you get a huge amount of deductions to drive your passive income down to zero and drive your AGI that way. Once you do that stuff, then yeah, you can pay your kids, do that, $12,000 here, deduct this, do some meals like that are necessary for your business. Like those are the small things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the whole, do the big things, the 80-20 first, and then the small things should follow.
Yeah. Yeah. The 80-20 rule. I love the 80-20 rule. So I ask this question with, especially with people that work with clients, what is probably your favorite success story from one of your clients?
I think if I do recall, like we do hot seats in our mastermind group, and I make them do PowerPoint presentations, but I really like it when they have the slide where things they did before and then things they did after. And I'm just pretty proud of them that, like, man, like these things that they're doing is so out of the world of what I think most people would consider or even do. Like things like, nobody in our world does 529 plans. 529 plans, you're kind of stuck with actually having to use the money for education. And what if your kids don't go to college, right?
Right.
And you can't touch it till then. So there's no flexibility. And then the worst thing about the 529 plans is they're just like 401ks, where you're stuck in the cafeteria of garbage options so that the Wall Street companies want you to do it in. Instead, we set up infinite banking policies for people to have the flexibility and not pay taxes in that vehicle themselves. If people want to, get that free e-course, they can go to thewealthelevator.com/bank and read more about that. But that's really like, that strategy makes 529 plans obsolete, right? Yeah. But, everybody's like, you need to have a 529 plan. If not, you're a horrible dad and, you're not being responsible. What do you mean you don't have a 529 plan? And, I'm sure my life these days is a bunch of like kids parties, and I just shut my mouth, right? Like, like people don't need to know what I do, right? But I don't go around trying to preach this stuff to people who aren't unwilling to kind of listen to it, because then I'll have to buy, lunch for everybody all the time, right? Once people find out. But that's kind of that's just one of like many things where I see like a client make these changes, and it's like, yeah, you're set up now, right? I mean, you're good. And like you said, like it's not just one little change like that, but maybe like you compound 6, 7, 8 things like that.
Yeah.
And you've got big change, but all these were like things that you could knock out in one day, right? It's just, I think the hard thing is like we're talking about that 401k thing, like stop and think for yourself, right? Don't just go off of what we're all taught to do.
Right.
I know it makes you feel uncomfortable, and that's where the community comes into play, right? Yeah. People can, if they want to kind of trial out our group, they can go to the wealthelevator.com/club and, join the list there. And, maybe, that we want to get to know each people, because our events are all closed off. We don't allow any random people to come, right? That's how we keep the quality of people very high. But that's, you need to get around other people, because a lot of this stuff is kind of like walking out into the abyss or on the plank in a way.
Right.
It's really out
Right.
there. I gotta admit, it's kind of out there.
Yeah.
So you kind of need that peer group also walking out there
Big
naked
time.
with you.
Big time. No, you're absolutely right. And you've said it multiple times, and I 100% agree that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I've used that phrase really more so in the last 5 or 6 years since I really got onto this entrepreneurial journey and then personal development as well. And I definitely changed all the people I was hanging out with. And sadly, some of those were family too. I mean, even though I love my family to death and we still keep in contact, I mean, there's some of them that are very scarcity minded people and very very negative, and it took its toll. And so when you can surround yourself, like you said, the community of people that bring you up, and especially when it comes to like masterminds, I love the mastermind reference. I'm in a couple myself, and I think it was Tony Robbins that actually said it. He's like, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. You need to get into another room with people who can help bring you up. Not, it's okay to be one of those people bringing people up, but at the same time, you want to be in a group that other people are bringing you up, so it's fun. And so I love what you're talking about, seeing those breakthroughs from people. Is there any particular client that just sticks out that you just went, whoa, this guy just did what? Is there anything like that just like kind of like,
Yeah, I mean, it's when they quit their job, especially when they make like just phenomenal salaries, like 3-4 times what I made as a W-2 working engineer, right? Because you think like that's the hard part, is like we call it the golden handcuffs. You make so much money out of your job, and yeah, you get to your point where you're financially free and you don't really need to have that big paycheck coming in. It's more about that shift between like when you're starting out, when you're under a couple $1 million net worth, money is more valuable than time. But there's a pivot point, and it's gradual. Most people, or especially in our group, they get to $3-4 million net worth and they still fight. I mean, I struggle with this myself, right? Like I consciously intuitively know that time is more valuable than money, but we hold on to these old habits. Again, we're the first generation millionaires. There's a reason why we got to there. We're not stupid with our money.
Right.
But it's just, that's the struggle. But definitely first world problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. So for you, it's seeing the people break free of those golden handcuffs. That's really like the big, well, I mean, all of the successes are always fun, but that's the one that really, really fires you up, is when you see somebody break free of that chain. So
yeah, I mean, even I get a little cringy. I'm kind of like, I mean, I know like numbers wise it works, right? Because they got a couple $1 million in a very like low risk investment, making 6%. That's, what is that, like 120 grand a year, and that's just a part of their portfolio.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, yeah, that works, right? You're financially free, you're zero gravity at that point. But man, isn't it nice to have like 15 grand rolling in every couple of weeks? Like, but I'm glad they're making the decision. I mean, I think I'm kind of in like around age 40. A lot of these guys are maybe a decade or two ahead of me. Or if you look at it pessimistically, they have 10, 20 years left of life expectancy left.
Right.
So the paradigm is a little bit different.
Right. And it's, I really like how you're bringing people from that high-end W-2 job to that next level and doing it through real estate. So I have an older brother who him and his wife, they have no kids. They were working, they just focused on their careers the whole time. However,
no income, no kids, dinks.
Yeah, dinks, exactly, dinks. And they did really well. And he never made CEO, but he made CFO at a couple different organizations. And they just retired in their mid-50s. And she founded and ran a consulting company for many years that she just sold. So they've made their millions. However, I still think he's going to go back, because he always wanted that CEO title, never got it. But it's funny because they did it the way that we're taught. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But they chose not to have kids, family. They worked all the time. They didn't have much lives outside of work. but they both went to school, they went to college, they got MBAs, they worked their way up throughout life. And for years, I thought that was because he's like 8.5 years older than me, almost 9 years older than me. And so for years, being younger than him, I thought that was the only way for it to happen. And it wasn't until I snapped out of it and I was like, wow. I was sitting at his house one day, and him and his wife were literally on their phones all the time talking to people from work, whatever. And we were supposed to be spending time as a family, and there was none of that. And so I said to myself, and this was just about the time we moved to Florida, maybe just before, I said, I have got to find something different. I know I want to make more money, but I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be the one it's driving my life, so to speak. And so
Yeah.
I love my brother to death, and my sister-in-law. They've done great for themselves. Just they did it really the hard way, in my opinion, the hard way.
Yeah. I mean, each to their own. I mean, you're probably spot on. I have seen like very, very rare cases of like, 1 in 1,000
Mm-hmm.
type of personalities where that, especially when they don't have kids, like
Mm-hmm.
the business is like their baby, and that is like, they very different marriage structures too. Like they're married, but they only see each other like one day out of the month, like things like that, right? Like, I mean, each to their own, right? And that's why I've kind of like adopted this mindset of like, look, there is no normal. And if you stop and think about it, and you map out what you want, you design your own lifestyle with a white canvas instead of what we're all taught, or what this
Mm-hmm.
even my group thinks you should do.
Right.
And you own it, and you've stopped and reevaluated a few times, and that's what you really want, then so be it,
Right.
right? That's your life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly right. And again, I'm proud of him. I'm proud of them for what they've done and what they've accomplished. Although several times over the years, have I said, "Why you guys are great
Yeah.
business? Why not
But
start a business?"
but for every 100 of those types of people that are that successful, that case I'm talking about is very rare, right? Most
Very.
times I think you're right, but I mean, most people that are like $100 million net worth that created their own worth or greater, especially billionaires, I think are definitely that rare case like that.
Yeah, definitely a rare case. I agree 100%. Great. So we're getting close here. So what's something else you'd like to tell the audience before we go? And then how to find you, of course. You've mentioned some websites. Make sure you get them the right ones and right connections and everything.
Yeah, I would say like, I mean, there's my podcasts and my YouTube channel out there. I would say like we cater towards people who are $500,000 net worth,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get up to $5 million net worth. Obviously, we have curriculum for after that, but that's kind of our sweet spot.
Nice.
What I would say is like, people are always looking for informal mentors out there, things to consume. Like what I would say is figure out where you are now, right? You don't want to be this broke person who hasn't done anything trying to follow what Elon Musk's doing. That's ridiculous, I think.
Right.
Like you need to figure out where you are now, and that's a real self-identify reflection. And unfortunately, the cattle grading system is how much money do you make now,
Mm-hmm.
and or what is your net worth today?
Right.
And figure out what that next step is ahead of you, right? In my book, The Wealth Elevator, we kind of outline those steps in terms of financial freedom. What are those cattle grading levels are, or the floors of the wealth elevator, said in a nicer way.
Right.
And we have a chart where you can see where you are, and then you obviously read the book so you know what the next floor is, and then the floor is after that, so you kind of cut corners. I mean, that's what we're trying to help people do here.
Yeah.
If I would have known what I know today, I wouldn't have bought 11 single family homes rentals.
Right.
I would have just bought a few and then gone into syndications after that.
Right.
But it's self-awareness first, as Gary Vaynerchuk says. You need to figure out where you're at now, and then plan a course ahead. But I think that's what's hard, right? Like a lot of the information out there, especially the free information, is predicated for to guys who haven't done anything yet and trying to aspire to be billionaires. Now, first trying to get to $100,000 revenue first, then
Right.
$500,000 revenue, and then $1 million, and join groups like EO, Vistage, YPO. Like it's a step stoning
Mhm.
way. Everybody thinks that they can just Hail Mary it to $1 million, $2 million revenue. That's just not how business is run. And that's just not how, in my world, financial freedom works, right? You get to $5,000 passive income, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, and then it kind of goes up from there. But if not, I think you're just, people get into this mindset where they just read a bunch of stuff, consume a lot of podcasts. I call it mental masturbation. They just,
Yeah.
just they're making progress by just sitting there and not taking action and things that make them feel good. But hopefully take that and self-reflect and like I said earlier, course correct along the way.
Yeah. And I love what you just said about not taking action, because we've all heard the phrase consistency is key. And whoever came up with that or said it was not that they were lying, but they weren't accurate, because it's consistency is not key. Consistent action is key, because you can consistently be lazy or consistently just sit there and listen to podcasts and do nothing and not get anywhere. But if you consistently take action, like you said, it's taking that action that will really get you to that next level. And to your point, wealth creation does not happen overnight. So get yourself to that 5,000 a month, then that 10,000 a month, then that 15, and work your way up from there. So how can people find you, Lane? Mention the websites again, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, they can check out the YouTube channel, The Wealth Elevator, and then we have the podcast, The Wealth Elevator.
Awesome.
If you're an accredited investor, join a group at thewealthelevator.com/club. If you're still looking to buy little rental properties, maybe not an accredited investor yet, check out our free info guide at thewealthelevator.com/turnkey. Buy that first rental property and start taking action.
Awesome. Lane, thanks for being here on the Wake the Bleep Up show, and it's been an absolute honor.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. See you later, guys.
Good man.